We're going to look now at the final project for typography, DCO 10005, 20th century type poster design or information sheet design. 1 decade, 3 content areas, featuring one of those 3 content areas. We want you to design for a contemporary audience, design for readability at close view, design for visual impact at a distant view, and use imagery to help communicate and engage. What I'll do is I'll show you through a few examples now. This is one from Neville Brody, fantastic example. Really great use of composition, dynamic arrangement of typography, fantastic use of negative space, and in this case colour as well, limited colour. And this is one of those rare posters, I think, that works well without an image. Its impact is derived from the predominantly typographic arrangement and the use of scale. This Piet Swart one, featuring Agzidens Grotesque as the typeface and the monotype system as the typographic technology, is a really striking design which has a kind of a nod to the style of the time, of the decade, but still reaches a contemporary audience. The typesetting is elegant, intriguing, dynamic, nice use of colour, interesting use of imagery. Wonderful work. This one here from Gaudi, about Gaudi. It's a very conservative layout, good control of hierarchy, and restrained but effective. This one here featuring Paul Rand as the designer, limited colour, elegant use of negative space. In this case, they've treated the 3 content areas, you could say, equally, but the feature is clearly Rand as being the kind of hero image here, and the capital PR for his name tell us that he's the feature. This next one is a great example of the use of creating your own imagery. It's very striking from a distance, and up close is still quite easy to read in almost every respect, except for this bottom right-hand corner. And it's a really colourful and bright example, which again has a nod to Edward Feller, who did some splicing up of letter forms as part of his style in the 1990s. And now we've got this one here featuring Mrs. Yves typeface in the 90s. Emigre was a digital type foundry, and TrueType is the type technology, and it is a beautiful layout, striking use of colour, and really works well across the room. This one, International Typographic Style 50 to 59, is hit and miss for me. There are definitely some strong points about it in terms of the composition mainly, but what the student's done here is used an old image for the heading and the background. You can see the background has a blurred texture to it, and I think that's distracting from the effectiveness of it. The next one here is a 1980s example featuring Neville Brody's work again, and also with a strong nod to his style, which was shambolic and kind of very dynamic, lots of shapes and layers overlapping. I think there's a reasonably good result here, though, without the design. It's still got some kind of a contemporary feel to it, while having a nod to the 80s. It isn't completely retro in its design. And I think that's good. We want you to design posters that have a contemporary feel. This one here, Digital Revolution, featuring Frutiger, Avenue typeface, and the high resolution full color domestic printers that allowed for almost typesetting quality to be available in a designer's studio. Striking use of RGB color, and that fits of course in with the printer, and cyan, magenta, yellow K printing, and a pretty nice use of negative space and composition overall, and a strong impact across the room. Another really lovely one here for 1920s Bauhaus and Futura, the typeface, and Typo Photo, which is the typesetting technology at the time, or something that was developed by Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, who was one of the teachers at the Bauhaus. Beautiful use of color photography, small illustration from Nagy's work, and dynamic composition and layout with a nod to the Bauhaus's use of tilted grids. Another one here, very elegant 1930s decade, focusing on Chauncey Griffith, type designer from the United States. One of his typefaces, Bell Gothic, and the Linotype machine. Striking use of color and dynamic graphic elements, and really nice use of an old photograph. Another one here for Frutiger, perhaps a little bit busy in the background, but still I think engaging, and nice use of hierarchy. Avantgarde Gothic, this featuring Herb Lubellin's Avantgarde typeface from the 70s. I do like this design, and I think the students done a very nice job of controlling hierarchy and composition. But it's perhaps a bit of a touch too much of a nod to the 70s in the graphic treatment around the outside. It looks a little bit dated, but still a really strong piece of work. And here the final one, which I showed earlier, is another Neville Brody attempt. Cutting edge is the heading. Keep that in mind too. Headings are really important, and featuring your decade on there at some point typographically is important. Keep in mind the use of imagery. This one here from the 1920s, Paul Renner, the Bauhaus. There's 3 images used here, and the images do help communicate. Images are very important on posters, I think. This next one is a good example of a image made by the student. A collage has been created, or perhaps she used an artist collage that existed. This is a student from before my time. The 3 smaller images really help communicate the different content areas. So it's a very clear communication from across the room, and it's engaging and dynamic and draws me in. This one here is Eric Gill, 30s, and really nice, clean composition and layout. Very good hierarchy. The sections are clearly identified, and there's enough visual interest and attention to keep enough visual interest and clear hierarchy and type design to keep my attention on the page. Very nicely done. And this one, the Swiss style, this is a good example of the use of an image where the students created a kind of a flat graphic illustration of the phototype setting disc that was used at the time in the 50s. And there's down below, there's a exploded view diagram describing that as well. And it's also a kind of a nod to a certain poster that was featured in the 60s. So it's a great interpretation there, illustration created by the student with a nod to technology and design style. That's all we got. Thanks very much, everyone. Hope that was useful.